Welcome to Telltale Books. A while ago I started going through everything I can get my hands on by JG Ballard in order of publication. And I did this because I've read some Ballard, not everything. What I've read was incredible, really blew me away. Ballard is definitely one of the most literate writers that has ever been published in science fiction magazines, and one of the earliest ones to achieve that level of I'm looking for the word. I don't want to say polish. I don't want to say professionalism because beyond that, I don't quite want to say genius, but I mean, he definitely goes beyond what most other writers of his generation publishing in the science fiction magazines had achieved by the time Ballard was doing it. You might be able to put writers like Philip K. Dick in the same class. You might be able to put Harlan Ellison up there, although where I'm at so far with Ellison, I don't think he's quite at this level yet. Ray Bradbury, maybe. For the quality of the writing, the just incredible way that words are put together, but also for the degree of intelligence that goes into the stories. Now, we haven't really seen a whole lot of that so far with Ballard. Most of what I've gone through, the first 9 stories that he's published, these stories, they were good. And in the case of The Waiting Grounds, I thought it was great. But they were still very much traditional stories. Not a lot of the imagery that Ballard would use, not a lot of the experimentation he would use was going on yet in these stories. With the story in this video, his 10th published work, called The Sound Sweep, he goes beyond that. Finally, starts reaching to the style that people now call Ballardian. I think that's how you pronounce it. Ballardian, Ballardian, I don't know. Ballardian. So The Sound Sweep was published. It's a novelette, which I believe is the longest work that I've encountered so far in this exploration of Ballard. I think it's the longest we've seen so far. It is a novelette, and it was published in Science Fantasy magazine, one of the British science fiction magazines of the 1950s. Issue number 39 in February of 1960. So we've now turned the decade to the 1960s, where we're going to really see a lot of great stuff coming from Ballard all of a sudden. Now, The Sound Sweep is about, trying to remember the character's name. I just read it before doing this video and I already forgot the character's name. I hate that. I have such a bad memory for names. But the main character is a guy who's mute. He can't talk because of abuse from his mother when he was a child. His larynx is damaged and he can't talk, kind of like me tonight. But he has a gift which makes him really good at the job of a sound sweep. Now here's the science fictional element of the story. Sound sweeping is something that developed because of the development of devices which were able to record and play back at ultrasonic frequencies, so that you couldn't really hear them, but you you experienced them, but you couldn't audibly hear them. And these devices revolutionize music. And people begin to value the silence audibly, and they just have this ultrasonic music. But apparently, and this is where we kind of go outside science fiction into one of Ballard's more surrealistic kind of leanings, which you're going to see a lot in stories from this point on. Ballard has the idea that when you eliminate audible sound, you still, I mean, people still do talk, cars still do make noise, there are still street noises and stuff. So there are sounds. And apparently sounds leave a residue everywhere. And it's not just like an echo that lasts for a second or more. It lasts for hours, it lasts for days, it can last for weeks. Unless you hire a sound sweep to come in and use I believe it's called a sonovac, and they vacuum up all those residual sounds. Okay, at this point, this isn't science anymore. This is surrealism. It's borderline on pure fantasy. But it still reads like a science fiction story. But the story becomes very fantastical. So this mute man, because of the unique ability he has, which is to be able to actually hear the residual sounds, so he can hear and understand conversations that happened hours before in a room. And so he has a very easy time finding where the sounds are and vacuuming them up. Well, the other main character of this story is a woman. Again, I'm forgetting the name. This woman is a washed-up opera star, put out of business by the ultrasonic recordings. Opera houses and symphonies have all, except for a handful, still hanging on. They've all closed down, and all the performers are just out of work and retired. But she was a star, and she's kind of like the actress in what's the movie? Sunset Boulevard, who is living in this fantasy where she's still a star. She's kind of like that. She's that type of a character, but she knows that her career is over. She knows that there's no place she can go and sing. And she doesn't like this. She has a lot of anger over this. And in the beginning of the story, she's described as very haunted by the sounds that she thinks are still left over of the crowds, you know, the applause and the orchestra and all that went on back when she was a star. But these things kind of, they don't really drive her mad, but they do make her very angry and very depressed. And so she hires a sound sweep to come in every day to try and get rid of it. Now, of course, a lot of it, he knows it's already gone, and that most of it's just in her head. But he comes every day and goes through the motions, and she thanks him because it makes her better. And so he befriends her, and he plans with this other guy he knows who works in the music industry. He's doing these ultrasonic recordings commercially, and he works with him to try and get a concert, one last concert for this opera singer. Now, of course, it's been quite a few years. She's been snorting cocaine. She's a really old woman. She doesn't have a voice anymore. She sounds like crap. But the mute sound sweeper, he doesn't see it that way. he hears beautiful music when she sings. I'll stop there with the synopsis. It's definitely one you got to read, so I do not want to spoil this for you. This is a story that's very well written, very well characterized. Like I say, it's a science fiction story, but the science is very fantastical, very surreal. This is the kind of thing Max Ernst would have come up with, or Salvador Dali is a machine that can vacuum sounds. You know, that's the kind of ideas the surrealists had in the 20s and 30s. So the story reads as science fiction, but also reads as fantasy, and also reads as surrealism. But the story is really about the characters. So there's a lot being said here about aging. There's a lot being said about how change kind of destroys our society and destroys the older members of our society by the fact that we don't want them around anymore because things have changed. It's, you know, we become very youth focused, and so we tend to be very downright nasty towards our older people in our society. A lot of ageism going on. But you have this one person who refuses to see this woman as washed up, refuses to see her as anything but a great opera star. And it's suggested at one point that she hasn't really lost her voice. What's really happened is people have lost the ability to appreciate singing, to appreciate great singing, because they don't hear it ever. They've lost touch with their past, and lost touch, and in a lot of ways lost touch with their humanity, I think. I don't know if that's what Ballard was getting at, but that's what I see here. And so Ballard is making statements about humanity, statements about aging, statements about valuing one another, statement, you know, that's the humanity part, statements about art, statements about change, and I won't give details, but ultimately a statement about rebellion and anarchism. Like I said, this is only a novelette, but it's a very powerful novelette. A lot is packed into the 30-some pages that this story lasts. This is brilliant. This is great. This is a top tale, and this is one I recommend to everyone. Maybe some people won't like the surrealistic side of things, but it's a great story with great characters and a lot of humanity, and really points the way to what, you know, science fiction so often was just used as escapist adventure, and Ballard was taking science fiction and using it and elevating it to the level of literature, making it far greater than anything that had been written in science fiction before. He was showing how science fiction was this new form of literature, different from the rest, but still just as great. This is what we were working toward since H.G. Wells. And Ballard's writing is really, really good too. Let's see if I can find a passage. There was one in particular that I loved. If I can, you know, of course now I'm not going to be able to find that passage. But there's just a lot of really good descriptions in this book. And pardon me, the closer things get to the mic, the less you hear my voice. So the book's going to be interfering with hearing me for a moment, because I got a crinkly broad art cover on this. Well, I'll just read the first paragraph. By midnight, Madame Gioconda's, and right away, La Gioconda, the Mona Lisa. Madame Gioconda's headache had become intense. All day the derelict walls and ceiling of the sound stage had reverberated with the endless din of traffic accelerating across the midtown flyover which arched 50 feet above the studio's roof, a frenzied, hypermanic babble of jostling horns, shrilling tires, plunging brakes, and engines that hammered down the empty corridors and stairways to the sound stage on the second floor, making the faded air feel leaden and angry. That's terrific writing, like we had never seen at that point in science fiction before. And that alone makes a story like this worth reading. This is that attention to the craft, attention to the wording, making it perfect to carry this intense imagery, these intense ideas that really, really excite the reader and make the story so much more powerful. The kind of things I've mentioned with Bradbury before, the kinds of things I've mentioned with Poe. You're seeing it now. I've mentioned it with Harlan Ellison, and you're seeing it now in JG Ballard very, very powerfully. This is where it gets great, and we're going to encounter a lot more great things from here. Now, where can you read the sound suite? Of course, I have the hardcover edition of the complete stories of JG Ballard, which is no longer in print, but used copies. I've seen a lot of them around the internet. Another used source, which I have but I don't have handy, is the collection of Ballard stories called Chronopolis and Other Stories that was published in 1971. Mine is, I believe, a book club edition. I lack the dust cover. I'm probably going to be putting that one on Etsy, actually, because all the stories from it are in the complete short stories, and I really love the complete short stories. I also stumbled on a page that has online, I forget the exact URL, just do a Google for the sound sweep and it'll be in the results. There was a web page where the whole story is right online. And of course, it's in Science Fantasy number 39 from February of 1960. You can find used copies of that magazine. I found it as a PDF for free online, so you can read it for free in the PDF of the original magazine. Now, the original magazine of Science Fantasy, they have cover art, but they don't have interior art for the stories, and the sound sweep didn't make the cover illustrations, so I won't be putting the magazine anywhere in the video. The cover of that issue, I don't like the cover illustration anyway. So that's Ballard number 10. And the next one, number 11, published a month later in New Worlds, is Zone of Terror, which again is in Chronopolis and Other Stories and the complete short stories of JG Ballard. I'll be reviewing that story fairly soon. I hope you'll join me for that video and all the rest, Ballard and all the other authors I'm talking about. And until then, like this one, subscribe to our channel so that you'll see all of our videos. You can click the bell so that you'll get notifications if you really want to know. And come back and join us for the next video.